Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to Canada Today Youth Edition. This is your host and your brother, Mohammed Maxwell Hassan, with a brand new episode that you're going to love. The whole idea is about Muslim reverts. You know, sometimes, mashallah, for so many of us, we may be born Muslim and we take a lot of things for granted, perhaps. But what about those individuals who had to find their way, had to find their faith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't have it written for them, that they're just born with this beautiful religion from the get-go, and they had to work tooth and nail, fight tooth and nail to get to knowing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And, you know, the whole idea is with regards to a lot of Muslim youth, there may not be a lot of help out there. So that's what we're trying to do today. Want to help out our Muslim brothers and our Muslim sisters who have gone through that journey. And with us today is we have a very special guest who has gone through that journey himself. His name is Miguel Cabral, and he's a recent graduate from the University of Toronto with a language and cultures degree. Miguel saw his undergrad take him to over 10 countries, and mashallah, it's good that it happened before COVID-19, and worked both domestically and internationally for the University of Toronto. Currently, he is heavily involved with the Muslim community hosting charity events, as well as his most recent collaboration with Islamic Relief Canada on their Dare to Dive campaign, which is raising money for orphans and children in need. Man, Miguel, it's going to be fun. Thank you so much for taking the time out and for, in participating in this whole conversation about helping Muslim reverts. And so as a starting point, I always like to introduce the viewers introduce the guests to the viewers with a story. And we'd love to hear your story. Every story is unique, especially when it comes to reverting to Islam. Everyone has their own. There may be some patterns here and there, but just like no two snowflakes are alike, just as everyone's fingerprints are all unique, everyone's unique story to returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always something worthwhile to hear. So for our viewers today, Miguel, if you can kindly share with us your story in a nutshell.
Yeah, for sure. Assalamu alaikum, first of all. I'm very grateful to be here and for being on the show. So alhamdulillah, I've been Muslim for just over 2.5 years at this point. And how this all came to be is very unique and to me, and it's very special and it's very close to my heart, as many reverts are aware of. Their stories are always something special to them and between them and Allah. So with me, I basically didn't really know too much about Islam before becoming Muslim. I grew up in a Christian household. My family's Portuguese. I was raised Catholic for many years. I was very, very practicing as a Catholic. I would go to church on Sundays, very traditional in my practices, would pray every day. At one point, I was even in the Vatican attending Mass with the Pope. Really unique experiences, something I'm always grateful for even to this day. Basically, I was in university. It was in the summer. I was like, I want to be productive during the summer. I want to take a course that I would enjoy, but it would also count towards my degree. And basically, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take an Intro to Christianity course because that's something I know I'm very passionate about. And to be honest, I should do very well in it because I grew up Christian. So that's what I did. So I ended up taking this Christianity course. And as the course goes on, we are basically learning about the new things, the history from basically the moments of Jesus living all the way to how it evolved over 2,000 years. And it was really interesting to me because the whole story of how Christianity was told to me and how academically the history is and the narrative that actual history has developed, they differentiate. And these started to get me to question what my beliefs were and really start to dive even deeper than what the course was. So I started looking into more resources and seeing from there. And then basically I came to the conclusion that I couldn't be Christian, but I still believed in God. The way the history was, it made me kind of like overlook that and see where everything was. So I had to take like a kind of step back and kind of take away my Christian beliefs and say, hey, what is history saying? How is this forming what I can believe? And I can go from there. But at the same time, I realized I couldn't be Christian, but believing in God was always important to me. So the natural evolution is going from Christianity to Judaism. And from Judaism, I started seeing that I couldn't really see myself as being a Jewish person, because the way I started to see things and how Judaism evolved as well didn't tie into what I personally believed. So naturally, because there's three faiths of Abraham, I looked into the third one, which was Islam, and I started looking into that super heavily, and basically going from buying books just to get a basic understanding of what it was about, to watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, all that stuff. So I ended up actually dropping the Christianity course because I'm like, this isn't really for me. Dropped Christianity, the course, and kind of also dropped Christianity, like the religion as well, kind of at the same time. It was kind of ironic how they both kind of tied in together. But would go to the library at school, and I think I'd spend around 60 to 80 hours a week just in the library of my university studying Islam. And from there, I realized this is what my heart really believed is true, and what I believed would develop my relationship with God, or Allah. So basically did that, studied, and then came to the conclusion within a couple weeks that I was going to become Muslim, and then ended up taking Shahada. And it's unique because I used to think that this is kind of like my doing and what I wanted to do and stuff like that. But then I started to realize there's a pattern of events that came from a year prior that set up why I took that course. And it was a lot of hardship and a lot of tests and a lot of things that Allah put into my life that really made it happen. So in a nutshell, that's about it.
MashaAllah, Miguel. Man, oh man. I think that heart of sincerity, that's one thing. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, when we met, I asked you, I said, like, nowadays with the media, when you flip on the news and you see all this stuff about Islam, I mean, a lot of it isn't so flattering. A lot of people would be deterred, but in spite of all that, you still plowed your way through the library and still read up on it in spite of all this. And what was your answer to that? I don't know if you remember when I was saying, why weren't, like, as they say, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. If the first impression was so negative and just so antagonistic and just so what made you, spurred you on, like, to say, what, no, like, I'm gonna put that aside, I'm gonna come to my own conclusion?
I do actually remember the first time we met and speaking to you about the story. And with everything going on in the media is always saying one thing. But I remember every single Muslim that I ever met in my entire life, they were always good people. And that's kind of ties into the whole thing with Islam in the West. Every Muslim that someone who's not Muslim meets is an example of Islam. And yeah, every Muslim that I worked with or that I had class with, always good people. And that always made me be able to distinguish between what the media is saying and how a lot of that negative stuff is not true, and how what Islam really is represented by are by these people and what their actions and what they say.
MashaAllah. So I guess one way to look at it is you don't judge a car by its driver, right? Like,
Yeah.
so in one way, so it's just, you don't judge Islam by the Muslims. You just got to look and see for yourself. So now, I guess, tying into the whole conversation with about Muslim reverts, and the thing about your story, sometimes you might hear a lot of people when they revert to Islam, a lot of times you might find people, they find it in, let's say, in the middle of their life or at the end of their life, after some catastrophic thing, or maybe some tragedy or something of that nature, where it's this real dramatic instance in their life where at the end, after exploring a lot of things, then they come to the truth. But the thing about you is that you were a youth when this all happened, and you've come to this on your own term. You didn't have like many years of doing so many things, and then you found this. Like, if I was to ask you, like, in I guess as a starting point, what are some of your experiences or opinion on things regarding misconceptions among Muslim reverts today? It could be that, let's say that you found, what are people who are born Muslim, what do they maybe perceive reverts as, or perhaps maybe among, like within like Muslim reverts, what are some misconceptions maybe they have about others? Like you can take it either way. What are some misconceptions that you've come across among Muslim reverts?
Yeah, so I'll kind of try and touch on both. But coming from the outside looking in, before I was Muslim, some misconceptions I know that I myself and some other Muslims who revert to Islam, the belief in Allah. So because they use the Arabic term for God, Allah, a lot of non-Muslims who eventually revert to Islam tend to find out that the God of Christianity, the God of Judaism, are the exact same God that Muslims believe. And I think that's very important, that we basically bring the bridges together and bridge all those together, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't realize that we're ultimately believing in the same thing, but we don't realize it. And that's something that I know I had a misconception about. I know a lot of things about Islam before I was looking into it, and other Muslim reverts as well. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Not a lot of people knew what his role was, and coming from a Christian perspective, I know a lot of Muslim reverts are actually coming from Christianity over. We're told that everyone after Jesus are like imposters and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to say that every single Christian believes that, but at the same time, a good amount of people are told that no one else came after Jesus. So when this whole news came to me that there's another prophet besides Jesus, this started to bring up some questions to myself and to many other people. So a lot of stuff that we have to go into, it's really important to do a lot of research on and make that determination for ourselves. But also there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there. Now, for Muslim reverts, the misconceptions that other Muslims have for Muslim reverts, it really depends, because I've heard some really interesting stuff. I've heard that a lot of Muslims believe that reverts usually only revert to Islam to get married. Some people have asked me that question. They're like, so Miguel, who are you getting married to? And I'm just like, that's a great question. I don't know. I just became Muslim to become Muslim. On top of that, there's a lot of there's a belief between a lot of Muslims as well that Muslim reverts are better Muslims than people who are born Muslim because they made that decision. And that's a big misconception, because I don't think people realize that the belief in God and everything like that, it's a very personal thing. So to determine that someone's a better Muslim is a very broad and big statement to make that I'll say right now isn't necessarily true. I like to consider myself an average Muslim. I think most people are on like the same level, but for some reason, a lot of Muslims within the community put them on like a pedestal, which I don't think is right. And I think at the end of the day, we're all at the same equal level. So, yeah.
So whether when it comes to marriage or if it comes to other things, man, that's amazing. Hey, man. So there you go, folks. Like for those who are tuning in, you see, like these are some of the things. These are kind of the conversations that are being had, and it's important to kind of shed light on it. And I like what you mentioned at the last point. I think perhaps if I could offer something about that, maybe where you have people who are born and raised Muslim, and then they look at a revert, and then you mentioned that putting people on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. Maybe perhaps it's almost like, mashallah, for those who revert to Islam, who come to it on their own terms, it's like their sins are wiped clean. It's like a clean slate. Whatever happened in the past, good, bad, or ugly, is wiped away. And I mean, in terms of, like, let's say the negativities, all the maybe the crimes, as long as you can rectify and remedy among people, that this is all good and well. But I think that maybe where that attitude comes in, is to say, like, somebody who is born again, so to speak, right? Like we have that idea that people who are wiped clean from that. So maybe that potentially could be where that whole atmosphere comes from. And then when you mentioned, Spawn, in the beginning about Jesus alayhi salam, that how there's maybe no one after, it's like, so there's that disconnect or that gap of, mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a gap in communication among Muslims? And like, is that it, or is it more so, let's say, people who are from other faiths not looking into, let's say, what Islam has to offer? Or is it that maybe Muslims who have the responsibility to convey the message are not doing a great job of it? Like, not to discount anyone and whatever their efforts are, but is it one or the other, or is it, what would you say about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the key fundamental things is, like you mentioned, I think it's a lot of other faiths don't actually look into what Islam has to offer. And I know for that in my life, especially, I grew up going to Catholic school, elementary school, and high school. And to be honest, I only knew one Muslim until I was maybe 19 or 20. So I think the certain communities can sometimes build a bubble and keep a lot of things within that bubble. And for example, going to Catholic school, Islam isn't really mentioned. I took a world religions course, and I remember uh, maybe Islam was only mentioned for like 1 or 2 days, and they're like, "Well, this is it, and we'll just move on." So it's one of those things where I feel like it could be very dangerous, kind of putting everything in a bubble, because understanding different perspectives of different faiths and how we should be working together. I feel like sometimes the different faiths really are disconnected in that way, because to be honest, even after a world religions course, and there's not much I really knew about Islam. And I'm speaking from my own perspective, but I know many other people within, for example, in Catholic secondary schools who aren't exposed to many Muslims are going through the same thing.
I see. So there's that component there, Spala. Let's shift gears a little bit in terms of in terms of look, putting yourself in the shoes of, let's say, someone else who is a Muslim revert. Could you pinpoint some sources of anguish and stress that a Muslim revert, especially youth, may face? Allow me to paint a quick picture. I know in your specific case, Sapala, that you come from a Christian family, and Christmas is around the corner, and you may be sitting at that dinner table. It may be a lot of tension there. So could you maybe highlight some of the things that perhaps maybe what you've personally experienced that you would like to share, or maybe you've noticed? What are some sources of things that may make things difficult for anyone who is from a different faith to embrace Islam as a Muslim revert?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is the disconnect. I kind of mentioned it before, but there's definitely a disconnect with, especially around the holiday times, with the family, right? For example, with Christmas, you're on the table, like you mentioned, and then when everyone's around the Christmas tree and they're opening up presents, they're like, "Why aren't you joining us?" Right? It's one of those things where it's like, "Why aren't you doing this? Why are you putting yourself out of the family," kind of thing? And it's just like, it's one of those things where, like, I know that's how people can see it, but at the end of the day, I know that my relationship with Allah is more important, and that, you always have to be patient, especially with your family and things like that, because sometimes they just don't know. And I think it's important that obviously you don't get angry or frustrated with it. You just have to be really, really patient, because I know eventually they will get and they will understand. It just takes time. And I think that kind of like disconnect with, oh, well, for example, Miguel's not going to church anymore for Easter or for Christmas Mass or anything like that. What's he doing? But then it also goes like, it's for the same thing with Muslim holidays, for example, for Eid, right? Especially this year in Ramadan, going fasting every day. You're fasting by yourself. You're not fasting with your family, right? You're doing everything, all this stuff by yourself. So you get disconnected from your family's Christian holidays, but you also are disconnected from your family again with your Muslim religious obligations. So it kind of goes hand in hand. At home with the family, that's one. But I think sometimes with the Muslim community as well, you can be disconnected. Sometimes it really is challenging, especially this year with COVID, where you are at home. So, for example, every Friday, I'd always look forward to going to Juma, the Juma prayer. And that also got taken away for a while because you couldn't go out. And a lot of Muslim reverts whose only connection to the Muslim community is at going to the mosque for Juma. And that does add a little difficulty to your day, because that one little bit that you would actually be able to communicate and connect with other Muslims, that also gets put on challenge, because when you're at home during COVID and you're on lockdown, it's very difficult to communicate in person to other Muslims by yourself. Another is the language. To be honest, the language is something that's also challenging. The Quran, everything like that. Yes, there are translations, but being able to pray in Arabic, and obviously my tajweed is not that good. Alif Ba and Ta is my extent of where all that goes. But knowing that I'm not fluent in Arabic, and I know not every Muslim is fluent in Arabic, but at the same time, it's always a challenge because you always want to be able to read what the actual direct words were from that were coming from Allah, right? So these are some of the challenges that a lot of Muslim reverts face, and especially with like the family and stuff like that. Sometimes they're not always understanding. Alhamdulillah, I've been blessed with a good family that understands and is patient with me, and I'm patient with them. So yeah.
Mashallah, man. I gotta tell you, I didn't want to sugarcoat this. I actually wanted to expand a little bit more about the whole family dynamics, because you see, even in the if we refer back to the Quran with Ibrahim alayhi salam, he had he's a prophet, and he was kicked out of his house. And again, not sugarcoating anything. I'm sure. I mean, Hamza, it's really good to hear that, you know, in your personal case is that things were understanding and this, that, and the other, but maybe, just maybe, someone who's watching this may have gone through some real drastic measures where their family essentially disowned him or disowned her. You're going against the family tradition. You're going against our generations. How dare you? And it's just, it can get very nasty very fast. Have you, I mean, again, keeping everyone anonymous, have you seen things like that? Have you heard of situations like that? If so, how do they deal with it? Like, what do you, I mean, how do you turn back on the one you call mom, right? Like, if they're not, like, how do you choose between your family versus what you think is your calling? And have you seen something like that or heard something like this? And then how do they deal with it?
Yeah, I actually have heard of this. There's a friend of mine that who also reverted to Islam, and he actually got married as well. So he got married to a Muslim woman and also reverted to Islam. So for his parents, who were very traditional Christians, it was very, very intense, and he did have to leave the home. And to be honest, on social media, sometimes I do have people reach out to me and ask for my advice on this. And to be honest, I don't think there's a direct one explanation for everyone that's like universal, except for the one thing is that with Allah, you'll never fail. And I think that's important because no matter what tests or trials you always go through life, Allah will always help you out. And I've seen it. I've seen it happen where this guy I know, he got married and everything, and his relationship with his family is at a very tense point, but his life is still continuing on, and he's still working on it with his family. But Allah has really blessed him in the way that he's still able to live. He still has a home to live in, and things did work out. Now with the family, you always have to be patient, and hopefully things will always come through. But as long as you prioritize Allah, then for sure Allah will always make you succeed. You're always going to be tested though. There's always unique tests for every single person, but with Allah, there's always a winning way at the end.
With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll never fail. I like that, man. It's just, but that's the thing. Sometimes you have to swim upstream. I don't know. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that situation where, I mean, like you grew up in a certain religious household, and then through your own conviction, you say, you know what, I don't think this to be true. I'm gonna step aside and kind of follow my own beliefs. You get one of two reactions. One is like that calm, peaceful understanding. All right, okay, if this is what you really want, I want you to be happy, and then we understand, cool. And then on the other side, you get the real, you swing the pendulum the other way, where it's really, intense, and it can get really bad. And the Quran it showcases that, right? Like that's what I'm thinking. So I'm thinking out there, like maybe at this particular moment, we'll save the advice also for the end, but maybe, and I know you mentioned there's not a one size fits all approach to this, and I know you mentioned as well, for those who are, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you never fail. Are there any kind of maybe mistakes that you see people make when they're dealing with their family, when they're not being so understanding or patient? Is there anything that you can pinpoint in that regard to say, yeah, definitely don't do this, right? Or some pitfalls perhaps that might be helpful?
Yeah, and I'm gonna just paraphrase this with saying it's easier said than done, but I think the one thing is getting angry at your family and lashing out at them and kind of arguing intensely with them, because at the end of the day, you have to realize is that changing your religion is a really big shock, And at the end of the day, I wouldn't say that your parents don't love you all of a sudden, but they're going to be more confused than anything. And if at that opportunity you're yelling and you're getting angry, and it creates a lot of tension that doesn't need to be there. But if you just basically follow the sunnah, you be patient, you be kind, you respect and you love your parents. These are the things that will only benefit you at the end, right? Because it's better not to say anything than to say something that you might regret saying, right? So
yeah, you can imagine slamming the door. Oh, how could you? Why don't you get it? And this, then the other. Wow, this, like you mentioned, easier said than done. But I'm just trying to, for those out there, man, like if you're soldiering on, mashallah, I gotta tell you, you gotta pressure, you gotta shoulder a lot of that responsibility, but it's upon you to be the bigger man or the bigger woman, right? To say that, you know what, like if let's just say there's going to be some hurtful things that are going to be said, there's going to be some guilt tripping, I'm sure, right? You've probably seen, look, you're nodding your head like, there is some things of that nature. But at the end of the day, your mom is still your mom, your dad is still your dad, your family is still your family. And at the same time, you owe it to them, although it's, what is it? Isn't it one of the 10 commandments, like honor thy mother and honor thy father, right? So that's,
yeah, it is. Yeah. And that's where it's like, when you realize that the core beliefs of Islam and Christianity, for example, are very similar, it's just really important to keep that connection going. And with your parents, especially when you're having these conversations, connecting those bridges.
Now, out of curiosity, just throwing off here, is there a difference between brothers who revert to Islam versus sisters who revert to Islam? Like, have you noticed that, let's say, I'm just wondering, this is just a hypothesis, like, is it maybe easier for, let's say, for guys to revert to Islam? They're like, okay, he's independent, he can do his own thing, but maybe they're more protective of the sister or their daughters. Is there any sort of dynamic like that, perhaps? Because maybe a sister who's watching this, maybe she's saying, well, they're not talking about the kind of struggles I go through. And is there a difference in terms of gender? Is there something out there that you can speak on?
I think there definitely is. And I think at the end of the day, as a practicing Muslim, I can go for my day-to-day and I can revert to Islam, and then I see you and you wouldn't notice the difference in me. But for a practicing sister who decides to wear the hijab, there's a huge identifier that she's visibly Muslim now. So initially when I became Muslim, I didn't really tell that many people because there's something that was very close and personal to me. And to be honest, there's a little bit of a fear that you're not sure how people are going to react. But for a practicing Muslim sister who decides to revert to Islam and then starts wearing hijab, that's not something you can hide. And the strength of character that you have to have as a practicing Muslim woman who wears hijab and all of a sudden starts dressing very modestly and stuff like that, it's not something that I think a lot of Muslim brothers have to go through, because they can kind of play it and they're like, oh, Miguel, are you Muslim? And then they don't really know. But as a practicing Muslim woman, that hijab's the identifier straight there, and you can't run away from that, right? It's just one of those things. And I know I've had some conversations with Muslim sisters, and to be honest, that's the pinpoint right there. When you're at family events and stuff like that, I never have to speak about my religion with my family. But for the Muslim sister who's wearing the hijab, everyone's just like, what's going on here, right? It's a lot harder for them. And that's not to take away from the struggles that the brothers go through. But at the same time, from a visual standpoint, from straight away, I think that's definitely one.
Fair enough. Yeah. So right away, what's that thing on your head? Like, what are you wearing? Right. That's, you can't run away from that. But then, what would you say, if you could dissect that a little bit more, what would you say are some of the things that the guys go through? Aside from, you can, I guess when you look at a brother, you can kind of guess 50-50. It's not like as obvious as you mentioned, but what would you say are some things that brothers go through that may be challenging?
To be honest, it really depends. I think just basic standpoint of being a Muslim, having to go pray, having to figure out, I know to be honest, it's a lot of very, very similar things between brothers and sisters. To find something that's very unique to brothers, finding time on Fridays to go to Jummah. I know that's an obligation that the men never really had before. Now they have to figure out, how am I going to get off time from work? I have to kind of do an explanation to someone somehow that I have to leave for about an hour and go pray. Then they're going to be like, why do you have to go pray? And then eventually they're going to have to figure out that you're Muslim, right? So for the brothers, I think it's definitely would be along the lines of Juma, because trying to work your way around that is kind of difficult and challenging. You can kind of play it off like, oh, I have to go out for lunch or something like that, but I don't know. It's something along the lines of that.
Fair enough. Understood. Yeah, man, that's a good point. And so sometimes you have to bring about, it's like these day-to-days that you don't really notice until actually it hits you like, whoa, actually you have to, have these obligations. When it comes prayer time, you're going to have to say, all right, I'm just give me a moment to have a break. That's a good point, mashallah. Good idea. I just wanted to explore that a little bit, just to explore that bit of the conversation. So now at this stage, if I can kindly ask you, Miguel, are there any resources out there available? Let's say right now, someone's watching this, a revert brother, a revert sister is looking at this and saying, you know what, Miguel, I hear what you're saying. I like what you're saying. It makes sense, and mashallah, it's great. But man, I need help. Like, it's not, I don't have a community behind me. I don't have a friend that I could lean on. I don't know who I could rely on. I don't know where to turn to. I mean, I've read the Quran, but are there any resources in particular that you could point towards to really help out a lot of the Muslim revert youth? That'd be helpful for them.
For sure. I think you kind of mentioned one of them is the Quran. The Quran itself, I think having a good translation of the Quran is a very good standpoint to start with. So one I recommend is the Clear Quran by Dr. Mustafa Khattab. If you're looking for something that's a really good, solid English translation, which will try and encapsulate the meaning of the Quran, but in English. Because not every translation is equal, and not every translation kind of gets the whole meaning of what the words from Arabic to English mean. As well, your local masjid, that's in person. I know with COVID and everything right now, it's very tough. But your local masjid will also have some good courses and stuff like that. So you could probably look into that and try and find some stuff online. And speaking of online, some really good stuff that you can kind of try and find and look into would be the Yaqeen Institute. So Yaqeen Institute is from Dr. Omar Suleiman. I definitely recommend it. If you've been on Instagram and seen any kind of Muslim-related post within the last year, you more than likely have stumbled across Dr. Omar Suleiman. And that's with the Yaqeen Institute, as well as Numan Ali Khan, the Bayina Institute. So these are two different institutes that provide really good resources for Muslims, tafsir of the Quran, lectures, as well as you can go and listen to some podcasts. I know Numan Ali Khan has his courses put into a podcast, so that makes it accessible. Sometimes you don't have time to sit down and watch a video, but on your commute to work or on your commute to school, you can plug in your headphones and then you're good to go from there and just listen to a podcast online. Even on Spotify, another good podcast that I recommend that is really beneficial as well is Freshly Grounded. They have many guest speakers, and you'll get really different perspectives of Islam, and you hear some stories and stuff like that. So these are some that I can just recommend off the top of my head that I found were beneficial for me. So yeah.
Awesome. So again, maybe taking that a little bit of a step further, when it comes to Masha, you provided those resources. Is there a way that you use those resources? Because let's just look at Bayna as an example. Maybe like hundreds of videos. People might be like, whoa, what on earth? Like, how am I supposed to navigate through all this? Would you suggest a particular topic, or would you suggest like how do you start like with this? Even see the Quran, maybe people could, it's like a book, it's a book, you read it from cover to cover, fine, like that's one way to approach it. When it comes to something like Bayna, where you have so much content out there, is there a way or advice on how to use these resources that you felt have been really beneficial for you?
So for me, I think one of the biggest things that I wanted to initially start to learn, obviously the Quran is very, very in depth, and to say you're going to learn everything about within 1 day or 2 days is, I'm going to be lying to you. It's going to take some time. But with Bayina Institute, for example, the tafsir of certain surahs, and they have a really good range of that. And looking into some of my favorite ones, for example, in Bayina, they do a really good comparison between Surah Yusuf and going through all of that and the different details and nuances that even just one sentence has, how much detail that the Quran actually has and how beautiful the language has been written in Arabic. As a non-native Arabic speaker, finding these details and seeing how they really are and have them explained to me, and really they kind of make it really plain and simple, is something as a revert I find really important to have. That's just one example. You can basically understand tafsirs of many different surahs. I find is a really good standpoint, first standpoint to go, and then you can go into different things like learning hadiths and stuff like that, and understanding hadiths and examples and stuff like that. I think is a really good way, but definitely looking into surahs and the tafsir of those, I think, is important.
Fair enough. So now one last thing again about the just honing in on these resources. For instance, on YouTube, there's a number of different topics available. Would you say that maybe looking at those topics that interest you, that would pique your interest, would that be a good starting point? Maybe, for example, was there a lecture from Noman Ali Khan that really speaks to you until now, that really helped you encapsulate what Islam, is there something like that maybe that people could look at and work with?
So I think you brought up a good point. I think definitely start with something that you're very passionate about, because it'll be very enjoyable. And I think if you start to really enjoy it, it's going to be easier, and you're going to want to do it often, and then you're going to be learning a lot from it, especially if you enjoy it, right? I think it's really important that you find someone that you can connect with. For example, if it's not Nouman Ali Khan, maybe it's Omar Suleiman, or it could be whoever else. I think it's important to find someone that you can connect with and then go from there. Now, one specific thing that I found that I really enjoyed specifically from Nouman Ali Khan was he did a comparison between Musa and Yusuf, and how they're so interconnected in so many different ways, but also they hold so many different opposites, and how their stories are told in the Quran, and how it's like how it's all put together is really beautiful, and it's very unique. And it's something that if you just read the Quran, you really wouldn't be able to make these connections. But when it's put all together for you in front, and you have this person narrating about it and speaking about these details that are so fine that you wouldn't be able to connect by yourself, or it would be very difficult for you to connect by yourself, I think that's very beautiful, and it's something that definitely stood out for me.
So mashallah, so there you have it, for one example for those who are interested. So that comparison between Musa alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam by Nouman Ali Khan. So there's that. So like the stories, the way it's told in the Quran, amazing. So that's one starting point. For those who, let's just say, if you're familiar with the story of Moses or Joseph, that's one way to bridge that gap and really make those parallels that maybe are not as obvious to the regular eye. MashaAllah, man. So Miguel, as always, all good things must come to an end, but it's been a phenomenal time with you. I'd love to always give this opportunity to share any final thoughts, any gems of wisdom that you would offer. Let's just say someone who's out there, again, they're looking at you and they're saying, man, Miguel, mashallah, it's good to see that you're up and about. You're really excited about being Muslim. You're proud. You wear it as a badge of honor. Help me out here, man. Like, I need some guidance. I need something. What if you knew what you know? If you knew then what you know now? What advice would you give that's really helped you the most? What keeps you going? Mm-hmm. What would you say to somebody who, let's just say, maybe you can speak to this on a number of folds. Let's say speak to the person who was born Muslim, speak to the person who's, isn't sure about Islam but thinking about it, and then speaking to the one who is a revert, a new revert. So born Muslim, on the fence, revert. What would you say to each of them?
Yeah. So I'll start with the revert because that's the one that I connect with the most. As a revert, my advice for other reverts would be proactive, take initiative. Sometimes it might seem like things don't come to you, but that's no excuse. You can definitely put a smile on and go out and do your best. I think that's something that I always remember was a challenge for me. Was I didn't know where to begin, and I thought help was going to come to me. But at the end of the day, you have to take that initiative. Sometimes that means going up to someone you don't know and saying, "Hey, how's it going?" and striking up a conversation. And to be honest, every Muslim that I've asked for help with, they've always been there and helped me out. But yeah, taking that initiative, I think that's a very, very important step for a lot of new Muslims. is to connect with people, take that initiative, go to the masjid, volunteer. I think connecting with the community as best as you can, especially as a revert, is essential, because at home you might not have your family that is part of that Muslim community. So try and connect, do your best. Be patient though, because things at the end of the day, they don't happen overnight, and you have to have sabr to be able to be content and be happy and to learn at the end of the day. So my advice, that's my advice for Muslim reverts. For someone who's considering Islam and doesn't know if it's the right thing or if it's the wrong thing, write down all the questions that you have about Islam. I think that's the first step that you should do if you're on the fence. Write down all your questions. And then, once you do that, take your time. Try and find the answers for them. And if you can't find the answers, try and find people who can get you those answers. Because if you're looking towards Islam, you shouldn't rush it. I think that's something that I know a lot of Muslims, they want to do. Like, we'll get them in as soon as possible. Let's do it. But to be honest, I know from my experience.
Yes, yeah.
Yo, are you there? Be patient with it. Yeah.
All right, you're good. Continue.
Okay. Sounds good. So yeah, for the person on the fence, write your questions down, be patient, look for the answers, take your time. And then for the people who are born Muslim, always treat your brother.
Yeah. Miguel, you're there? All right, well, slight technical difficulty, but until he gets back, I gotta tell you, mashallah, when he speaks to the Muslim reverts, mashallah, I gotta tell you, man, like that's a lot, right, to take in. For those being patient, it sounds, again, those two words, they sound so easy, but it may not be it. Oh, Miguel's back here. Look, he just teleported into it. It's all good. All good. Continue, please.
Okay. Where did I get?
Oh man, Miguel. So you're about the ending. Miguel, if you can still hear me, we'll give it one more try. If anything, as I always say, technology can be a blessing or a curse. But at the end of the day, with Miguel, one of the biggest things that we can take away from him so far is that when you're sincere, you do your best and you leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doors start opening up for you like you could never imagine. You may have heard talks like this, you may have seen videos like this, and you might be wondering, hey, who knows if it happens to me? But you never know. All right, take it away, Miguel. If it's good, if the internet's okay. Miguel, you all right? All right, khair, inshallah. I guess at this point, no worries. It's okay with Miguel. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest things, again, with Miguel that, if I can say, at least on behalf of him, is that, mashallah, his heart, his way of going through a lot of things is that he's sincere in his efforts, in spite of all the negativity that you see in the media, in spite of all the negativity that you see around you. It doesn't matter what sort of background you come from, as long as you're actively seeking the truth, it is what it is. So Miguel, we'll give it a shot. Is this good? Are we okay?
Can you hear me? No,
yes, you're good to go.
Okay.
So it's all good. But I guess the final thing was about for people who are born Muslim. That was the last group of folks.
For people who are born Muslim, basically treat everyone the way you'd want to be treated, and go out of your way. Sometimes they're just putting on a smile and smiling at someone, but definitely embracing everyone, because you never really know what's happening with people behind closed doors. And I think that's something that you should always go out of your way to extend your hand and just see how everyone's doing. And sometimes it's a little easier said than done, but
yeah. Well, that's it, man. I think he nailed it right there. Just, it's easier said than done, but lending a help, as they say, treat others as you want to be treated. That's the key here. And so with that, I guess I just wanted to conclude by saying that for all the Muslim reverts out there, mashallah, again, just wanted to give my salams to you. It's not easy. It's not easy at all for our brothers and sisters who maybe they had to fight tooth and nail to get to this faith. But as they say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. And so we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that for those who do our best and leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Miguel, you want to say something? It looks like, I don't know what it is, what's going on with the Wi-Fi, but all I can say is that really, really thank you so much for for your thoughts and appreciation. Again, the last thing you mentioned about treating others as the way you want to be treated. And so at the end of the day, with this whole show, helping Muslim reverts, that's the key. And just do your best and forget the rest. Leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So do your best. Leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's all a test. And with that, this is Brother Muhammad Maxwell Hassan signing out. Muslim Youth, Canada Youth, Canada Today Youth Edition. And so with that, as always, it's getting late here, but it is what it is. Canada Today Youth Edition. Tune in on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. With that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.